In the rewrite tonight, Paulism. First, Ron Paul and now Rand Paul have pushed ideas that no one else in the Republican Party supported. Here's Ron Paul in 2008 at a Republican presidential primary debate talking about the Iraq War.
In 1952, we Republicans were elected to stop the war in Korea. 1968, we were elected to stop the war in Vietnam. And tragically, we didn't stop it very fast. 30,000 more men died. So when I talk about these long-term stays, I think, how many men are you willing to let die for this? For something that has nothing to do with our national security. There were no Al-Qaeda there, had nothing to do with 9/11, and there was no threat to our national security. They never committed aggression. It's unconstitutional. It's an undeclared war.
There he is at the Reagan Library saying that to Republicans. That is part of why Ron Paul lost in that campaign. He was saying things that Republicans did not want to hear. He also said plenty of things that Republicans did want to hear, but no Republican candidacy could possibly survive the things that Ron Paul said that the Republican Party was not ready to hear. And now, 5 years later, Paulism is running rampant in the Republican Party, at least on the matter of military intervention in the Middle East. Rand Paul isn't the only Republican opposed to a military strike in Syria. Many Republicans in the House and Senate found their inner peacenik when President Obama proposed striking Syria. Now, they did it for a variety of reasons, including cynical political posturing, but one of the reasons was Paulism, the anti-war component of Paulism. We know already that, like his father before him, Rand Paul will never be president. And like his father before him, Rand Paul will never be on a Republican presidential ticket, not even in the vice presidential slot, because Rand Paul, like his father before him, just says too many things that Republicans disagree with, especially conservative Republican primary voters. Rand Paul does everything he possibly can to please those people. He slams Obamacare as hard as every other Republican every chance he gets, but every once in a while, Rand Paul's libertarianism finds him in agreement with liberalism, as happened today in a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. What you are about to hear Rand Paul say is absolutely extraordinary. What he said is all true. His reasoning is simple common sense. But virtually every word you're about to hear can and will be held against him in the court of Republican presidential politics. What you are about to hear is the politically bravest thing said in Washington today.
If I told you that 1 out of 3 African-American males is forbidden by law from voting, you might think I was talking about Jim Crow 50 years ago. Yet today, 1/3 of African-American males are still prevented from voting because of the war on drugs. The war on drugs has disproportionately affected young black males. The ACLU reports that blacks are 4 to 5 times more likely to be convicted for drug possession, although surveys indicate that blacks and whites use drugs at about the same similar rate. The majority of illegal drug users and dealers nationwide are white, but 3/4 of the people in prison for drug offenses are African American or Latino. Why are arrest rates so lopsided? Because it's frankly easier to go into the urban areas and make arrests than it is to go into suburban areas. Arrest statistics matter when applying for federal grants. It doesn't take much imagination to understand that it's easier to round up, arrest, and convict poor kids than it is to convict rich kids. The injustice of mandatory minimum sentences is impossible to ignore when you hear the stories of the victims. Edward Clay, 18 years old, was a first-time offender when he was caught with less than 2 ounces of cocaine. He received 10 years in jail for a mandatory minimum sentence. Weldon Angelos, who the chairman mentioned, was 24 years old and was given 55 years in prison for selling marijuana. There is no justice here. It is wrong and it needs to change. Federal Judge Timothy Lewis recalls a case where he had to send a 19-year-old to prison for conspiracy. What was the conspiracy? The young man was in a car where drugs were found. I don't know about you, and this is Judge Lewis, but I'm pretty sure one of us might have been in a car in our youth at one point in time where there might have been drugs in the car.
You just heard a Republican senator quoting an ACLU report on how the war on drugs visits disproportional suffering on black men. An ACLU report. You just heard a Republican senator say, quote, "There is no justice here." You just heard a Republican senator quoting a judge saying, "I'm pretty sure we've all been in a car at some point in our youth where someone had drugs." What other Republican senator would say that? But Rand Paul wasn't finished. He improvised something that wasn't in his written statement, something about President Obama that his Republican rivals for the presidency will never let him forget.
Imagine this, and I'm glad the president has such great compassion, because he's admitted, like a lot of other individuals who are now elected to office, that at one time he made mistakes as a youth. And I think what a tragedy it would have been had he gone to prison. What a tragedy it would have been if America wouldn't have gotten to see Barack Obama as a leader. I just don't know why we can't come together and do something about this.
What a tragedy it would have been if America wouldn't have gotten to see Barack Obama as a leader. Rand Paul's words. As soon as Ted Cruz heard that, he wrote in his head a 30-second attack ad against Rand Paul using that sentence.
What a tragedy it would have been if America wouldn't have gotten to see Barack Obama as a leader.
The Republican attack ads against Rand Paul are not going to put that sentence in context. But even if they did, the context would be Rand Paul saying that it is a national tragedy that 1 out of 3 African-American males is forbidden by law from voting. The context would be Rand Paul's view of the cruelty of the war on drugs. Rand Paul's not going to win that round when this quote comes up in a Republican presidential primary, and he has to know that. He had to know that when he said it today. Rand Paul will continue to give false hope to the Tea Party about repealing or defunding Obamacare. Rand Paul will continue to say things that are untrue. And as we have pointed out on this program, he will say things that are ludicrous. And he will say politically cowardly things. But that's not what he did today. Senator Rand Paul said the politically bravest thing that anyone said in Washington today.
What a tragedy it would have been if America wouldn't have gotten to see Barack Obama as a leader.